India's literary pop star Amish Tripathi. Welcome
Hi,
to
how are
Jump
you?
We Met. Very well. You know, I've been going through your new book, Ravan. This is possibly, to my mind, the most fascinating of the books that you've written so far.
Thank
because
you.
it's very
Thank you.
different from what you've written. Usually, you've got characters who are very pious, very holy. This is dark, it's dirty, there's a lot of grime there. Different from all that you've written so far.
Certainly is. Probably the darkest book I've ever written. The kind of character Ravan is, there's a lot of anger, a lot of ego, but what makes him so fascinating compared to many of the other quote-unquote villains that we see in modern books, who tend to be just thugs, just violent men. This guy is genuinely deep, genuinely complex, a scholar, a brilliant musician.
Is
Makes
Ravan
him
in
very
your
fascinating.
mind a villain, or is he a victim of his circumstance?
The answer to this question will differ depending on whom you ask it to and when
I'm
you ask
asking
it.
you.
And when you ask it. Our image of Ravan is based on some television serials. Just a pure villain, a monster. But if you ask the people who actually wrote the original Ramayana, Valmiki ji for example, he had a very nuanced take. His negative points were of course shown, his anger, his massive ego, but his positive points were also shown, not just in the Valmiki Ramayana, most of the ancient versions of the Ramayana. Our ancestors were far more nuanced, far more liberal, far more accepting than we modern Indians are.
No, so
frankly.
there are
We can learn a
moments-
lot from our ancestors.
So since there's so much philosophy in your book, philosophically speaking, Amish, why in your view does Ravan end up as a villain and Bhagwan Ram end up the way he does?
Grief and suffering happens, to everyone, and it's not just me saying it, Gautam Buddha said it, and that wisdom comes down to all of us. Often what defines life is how you react to it. Ravan reacts to his grief and suffering with rage, hatred. The world hurt me, I'll burn the world down, that kind of attitude. Sita Ma reacts to grief and suffering with fierce determination, with pragmatism too. Lord Ram reacts to grief and suffering with honor, with dignity. The more unfair that people are to him, the more dignified he will be. That is the essential difference. You can get lucky and have the right mentors at the right point of time. Like Ravan
So
did
is
have
there
those
some
opportunities.
goodness or evil innate in you, or is it about upbringing, mentorship, education? In your books it seems as if there are things that go wrong in Ravan's life, and those can go wrong in anybody's life, which take him on a path of destruction.
Evil is a very loaded word. In the Indian way, this thing of blaming others or blaming the divine is pointless, because ultimately it is your choices. Even Valmiki ji, for example, the traditional story was that he was a robber. I'm sure you know that story, and then he became a good man. So what is the kind of mentorship that he got, right? But then when an opportunity came, he chose a different path. So it is completely in your hands. Blaming someone else is not the Indian way. In our way, even the gods aren't supposed to judge you, right? You're not supposed to judge gods. No one is supposed to judge anyone. Your fate is completely in your hands. Your karma is in your hands. You will decide what will happen to you in the future through your karma today. And that's the thing to learn from Ravan. You make the wrong choices. You react to suffering with anger, with hatred. A little bit of anger is good. Excess anger, unrelenting anger, no, that's not good.
Do you think you are writing history? Are you writing fiction? Are you writing mythology?
Okay, let me answer this from two perspectives. One, the assumption is history speaks the truth and mythology does not speak the truth. In the, not just the ancient Indian way, ancient ways across the world, it was believed that the only subject which can lay claim to absolute truth is mathematics. No other subject can lay claim to the truth. Even theoretical physics is accepting now that your understanding of the universe is defined by your observer bias. So if there's no absolute truth, there's my truth, there's your truth. Mythology is in a sense the mature adult which accepts that there are multiple truths. History is like an immature child which keeps clinging, I'm the truth, I'm the truth. This question doesn't really matter. It's more about, getting the philosophies across. Yeah, I believe Lord Ram, Lord Shiva, Lady Sati, Lady Sita, they existed. I believe they were our ancestors.
Why do you believe that?
I just believe it. I don't try to prove it.
No, but there has to be some
I'm
proof.
not trying
You're a
to force.
rational human being.
No, I'm not trying to force it. That's the point I was trying to make on my truth, your truth. This truth inspires me. I believe that all of us are their descendants. Their blood flows in our veins, and this inspires me.
We were born in a very religious family, but growing up you were an atheist. You didn't believe in God. Why? And how did that transition happen?
When I was young, I was a believer. So I turned into an atheist in my teenage years. Various reasons, but primarily teenage rebellion. I would have been an atheist for a little over a decade, and writing Immortals of Meluha, my first book, kind of slowly brought me back to faith. Yeah.
How?
I think for someone like me, who's by nature a rebellious person, that's who I am. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's who I am. For people like me, Lord Shiva is the most attractive god.
How many gods are there in India?
It depends on how you count it. I mean, some people
How do
say
you count
33 groups of gods. Some people say 33 core gods. It depends on how you translate Koti from Sanskrit. Again, one of the ways in the Indian way is actually all of us are gods. That the difference between us and gods is they've discovered the divine within. We are yet to discover the divine within.
So you're saying 33 core gods.
Huh.
Why do you think Lord Shiva is, according to you, your favorite god?
He's so cool, man. He's the god of the rebels. He himself is a rule breaker. He is the lord of the arts. He is the originator of the Vedas. He has so many wonderful contradictions that make him so attractive. He doesn't differentiate between men and women, doesn't differentiate between highborn and the lowborn, doesn't care what your background is. If you're a good person, he'll bless you, doesn't care, which makes him so attractive. No disrespect to any other god or goddess. Just for me, I should add, for Ravan, Lord Shiva was his god. For Lord Ram also, Lord Shiva was his god, and for all of us also.
There's so many different versions of the Ramayana. Which version appeals to you the most and why?
There are some parts of Adbhut Ramayana which appeal to me, some parts of the Valmiki Ramayana, some parts of Ramcharitmanas. You know, there are discussions on governance in Ramcharitmanas, on taxation policies, by the way. Some parts of Ananda Ramayana.
No, so there are two ways of looking at it. One is in terms of what they're trying to communicate, that's the messaging. The other is in terms of how they're written, how they're structured, the prose. Who do you think wrote the best Ramayana?
You know, one of the things in the traditional way is Ved Vyas ji's approach to language was very different to Valmiki ji's. Essentially, Valmiki ji's descriptions, beautiful poetic language was grafted into so many later Sanskrit words, whereas Ved Vyas ji was very direct. It wasn't so much about poetic language. He was like, I need to communicate some philosophies to you. So make the words clear, crisp, but get the thoughts across clearly. So it's different styles. Neither way is better or worse.
Amish, you introduced a lot of Hindu mythology to a younger generation that was essentially feeling that there was nothing that they could relate to. Do you at some level feel bad that we were bringing up, or we are bringing up, a generation which isn't connected adequately enough with its roots?
Our education system has been designed to make us forget and destroy our culture. Our education system teaches us nothing about our culture, our roots, our philosophies, our sciences, our mathematics. They teach us nothing. And in this kind of atmosphere, the fact that our culture still remains alive shows the innate strength of it.
No, so while we're trying to revive Indian culture, does it go over the board sometimes? Suddenly starting to say that, oh, we had treatment for cancer, you know, there were aircrafts, there were spacecrafts, and then suddenly the whole world is looking and saying, kaisi baatein kar rahe hain?
There's no proof that we had aircrafts. We certainly didn't travel to Mars. Having said that, we did have plastic surgery. We did have surgery. Shushut and Charak's works clearly specify that. Mathematics, we had great ancient achievements in the area of knowledge.
No, so I don't contest
and these
that.
fantasies.
I don't contest that. I'm saying that at some level, while we try and pay greater tribute or attention to our culture and our history and our roots, we can't get carried away.
The way I see it is these fantasies prosper in an atmosphere of ignorance. The solution is more knowledge. We have at least 3 to 3.5 million non-printing press manuscripts that the National Manuscript Mission has collated, and it shows the knowledge production of our ancient culture. This is more than the rest of the world combined. We haven't even translated 99% of them, let alone study them. So in an atmosphere of ignorance, fantasies will prosper. They don't know the scripts, they don't know the text, they don't know the language. How they're supposed to translate it is the job of the scholars and the education system to translate and communicate that knowledge. The first is the language and the scripts.
How much of these scripts and the manuscripts that you refer to can we read and how much is not?
No, I was speaking in terms of the Lipi. Devanagari is a relatively recent script. The Brahmi script, the Modi script, there are many scripts in which our texts
Do we understand
appear.
them fully?
Sadly, that knowledge is getting lost. Like I said, 3 million manuscripts. Each manuscript will need at least a 3-person team to study it, because you will need one person who understands the script, the Kharoshti script, Brahmi script, Modi script, whichever, right? You need another person who understands the language, Sanskrit, and you need another subject matter expert. So, if it's a medical text, Just a Sanskrit guy won't be able to understand what's being spoken, right? So you need a medical expert, you need a script expert, and you need a science expert. This for every 3 million. We need a government effort for this. I myself privately fund. The first step is to save these manuscripts. Yeah, many of them are literally falling apart. They need to be scanned. So there are private guys doing this. To all your viewers, I would appeal: find these guys, fund them. It's our heritage. We must do it.
Amish, you've recently been appointed director of the Nehru Memorial in London. Looking at India's ancient manuscripts and reviving that knowledge, is that part of your core challenge?
I think it should be the core challenge for every single Indian. We are the inheritors of the greatest body of knowledge any culture has ever been blessed with.
Do you think our culture is the greatest because all cultures
No. A brilliant Arab thinker and writer, he described different cultures, shows you an idea of the attitude of those cultures. He says the Chinese king, the Chinese leader was called the leader of humanity. Because that's the way the Chinese saw themselves. They're the middle kingdom. They're supposed to rule it all. Turks were the ones who conquered us, right? They were the ones who also destroyed much of the Arab world, China, everyone. They were the greatest conquerors the world has ever seen. Their leaders were called the king of lions, right? That's how they saw themselves. How did the Indian leaders see themselves? One of the titles they always had was the Lord of Wisdom. Our culture always prized wisdom as the greatest, pursuit. That's why we've been blessed with this. I'm not saying we need to blindly follow traditions. Even our ancestors, we didn't blindly follow even the gods and goddesses. That was our attitude. Everyone was up to questioning. Everyone could be questioned. If we've been blessed with this body of knowledge, we must at least try and understand and use it as a base to build a great culture.
But the problem is what we consider knowledge for the large part. It was a very Western construct of what knowledge was defined as. To what extent have we changed that? What more do we need to do to be able to change it further?
Like I was saying, even the manuscripts, they aren't necessarily only spiritual and philosophical texts. You can get into Western knowledge is about materialism, ours is a little more spiritual. Not really true. The Charvaks were very material. But what I'm talking about is not that. I'm talking about actual hard subjects, mathematics, physics, astronomy, metallurgy. There's a wealth of knowledge, data, information, insights. There are there in these texts. It's in our selfish interest to try and study them and then build on it. The solution is not that we have to somehow prove the greatness of our ancestors. We don't need to do that. We have to become worthy of them. Like the relative achievements they had compared to the rest of the world, we are nowhere.
So in your new capacity as having been recently appointed as director of the Nehru Memorial, how do you hope to do this?
Two things. One, bring across the liberal traditions which are in consonance with modernity of our ancestors, which can help us today, the questioning spirit, right? Secondly, try and revive as much of that knowledge as we can, or support other, great scholars, great scientists in reviving that knowledge, and use that as a base to truly build an India that is worthy of our great ancestors.
So Amish, here's what I want to do. As somebody who hasn't read very much of the ancient texts and says that, okay, Amish, we've read your books, we now want to take this further. What's the next step? How do we go about it?
I think the thing is actually our philosophy is not just one book, it's an entire library. So we can spend a lifetime and still won't read even, perhaps even 1% of it.
Okay, so that's
true. If I have to, if I have to, a wonderful way, I just noticed this lovely, of course, picture of Lord Shiva and see this line, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. It's from the Rig Veda, right? From the Asya Vamasya hymn. It translates as, truth is one, but the wise men speak it as many. When you force just one interpretation, you cut off paths for knowledge.
Okay, so what's the first step if somebody wants to develop an understanding of ancient Indian history, mythology, culture, and obviously people don't have a lifetime, they can read a few books. Which ones would you recommend and why?
If it's a graduation course, the first standard is the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. That's the entry level. Once you get into that, then you go deeper into the Puranas, the Brahmanas, Aranyakas. There are many texts, and the Vedas are at the graduation level, and the postgraduate level are the Upanishads. Those are extremely complex. They are pure philosophies, usually in the form of conversations. Vedas, Upanishads, the suggestion is try and learn it through a guru. It's difficult to understand it just by reading it.
Do you feel bad that for many years after independence, we probably tried to move as far away from these learnings as we possibly could, trying to ape a very Western construct of what education and secularism was about.
We continued with the British colonial system, and this is extremely unfortunate, and what's happened has happened, right? The debate has sadly now gotten into, is a one set of group keeping on blaming the British colonial Raj and those Indians who are very anglicized, and those who are anglicized on the other hand saying, no, we are the ones who saved India and civilized India. Both of them frankly need to be ignored. We can't keep blaming the past forever. We've been independent for 70 years now. We are a democracy, yeah? We can take charge, no one's stopping us. If we start pushing our politicians that we want our education system to be Indianized, our literature courses should first teach Kalidasa, Thiruvalluvar, Mirza Ghalib, Bhasa, before they teach Shakespeare and Tennyson. Or if our maths courses, we insist that teach Bodhayana, teach Bhaskaracharya before you teach Euclid or Pythagoras. If we start insisting on this, look, our politicians, they will do what gets them votes, right? So it's in our hands. If we start fighting for it, the politicians will deliver, yeah?
Amish, what's the connection between bored bankers and successful authors? Two of India's best-selling contemporary authors both happen to be bored bankers.
Well, I think it's just a coincidence that both Chetan and I are bankers. Gods in kind, both of us have done well. I think he has been, in many ways, a trailblazer. The publishing industry started selling in big numbers thanks to him. Before him, it was believed that a bestseller meant 5,000 copies or 10,000 copies.
Is he a friend or is he competition?
No, not really. Yeah.
But you're both competing for the tag of India's best-selling author.
Books aren't like sabun toothpaste, right? So it's not that someone else has to sell less for someone else to sell more. I guess we both do well. We both do good numbers.
So who has the bragging rights to be called India's numero uno best-selling author?
That doesn't matter, yeah. This is not something that that one keeps track. Like I said, both of us are friends. We keep chatting on what's happening in the industry. There are challenges that the industry is facing. Bookstores are facing challenges, for example.
So how much money have your books made so far?
A good number.
Somewhere in the region of 150 odd crores?
Yeah, good number, yeah.
You're very, very, very coy about these things, right? I mean, if you're selling well, you're not doing any black on the side, it's all legit work. So why are you so coy and shy about this? My understanding is about 150 crores, right?
Probably, yeah.
Out of the 150 crores that your books have sold, how much do you get?
A fair number.
What's your answer? You're an IIM Calcutta pass out. Numbers are important.
But the secrecy of numbers are also important.
No. So I'm saying that if there's somebody who wants to be like a Amish Tripathi or a Chetan Bhagat, he's wondering, okay, so this guy's books have made 150 crores. How much would he be getting out of this?
It's like this. Honestly, the way the book trade is, it's a lot like the acting trade or the film trade. It's not like banking or journalism where there's a logical career progression. You get a promotion every few years. You get fair increments. In the space of the arts, there are a few who make more money than they ever thought possible, and the most actually don't really make enough even to pay the bills at the end of the month. So which is why most authors usually have a job on the side. And what I always advise to all writers, don't do it for money, right? You have to do it because it's a voice of your soul. You can't think of any other way besides writing your books, and if it succeeds, great, right? Like it worked out for me. I was lucky, but my next book could flop, yeah, and I'd have to go back to banking. That's it's certainly possible.
Why were you getting bored when you were in banking, right? You had a couple of jobs in India, one in Singapore.
There's a reason, I think, why they call it compensation, because they destroy your mind through the month and then compensate you for it at the end of the month. But look, it's not a dishonorable job. You earn good money.
No, why were
you can meet
bored?
your responsibilities. It's not what you'd call an exciting job, no? Especially my last job was life insurance, man. Have you heard of Woody Allen, the American film director? So he had said that there are things worse than death. Have you ever spent an evening with a life insurance guy? And I was in that industry. I was designing life insurance products. Yeah, it's boring, yeah, but it pays well. It pays well. So there's no dishonor in the job.
But you now make, as a multiple, how much more than you were making as a banker?
Yeah, far more. Like I said, more money than I ever thought possible. The real pleasure is not in that. The real pleasure is I get to do things that I love to do.
How many books do you read in a month?
At least 5-6 a month.
5 or 6?
At least.
All of them are physical copies or there's Audible included in that?
No, normally I like physical books. It's only international books where it takes too long, for delivery. So then I download on my Kindle. But normally I like physical books.
For all those who are watching right now
Yeah.
and thinking that they're getting bored in their current jobs, they want to consider moonlighting on the side like you were on your way to work, writing away your first book. And they're saying, what is that Amish Tripathi learnt about what it takes to write a bestseller?
First thing, don't attempt to write a bestseller. Write a book that's the voice of your soul. Read a lot. Like my rough ratio is for every page that I write, I should read at least 100 pages. Don't think of it as reading as research for the book. Just be hungry for knowledge. You never know where knowledge gets used. Just keep absorbing knowledge. Travel, and when you travel, try and travel like the locals. Don't say that, I'm going to be in Italy, but I want my, Indian food out there. Eat local food, try and learn a bit of the local language, meet locals. Every person you meet has there's an opportunity to learn something from that person. There's a person I had met, a friend, when I was still in banking, so it was like, more than 10 years ago. And she was having some family trouble and she wanted my advice on, on something. She had a pendant, with something written in words, her gods, this thing. She would just hold the pendant. And the more trouble she got, the more tighter she'd hold it. And when she calmed down, it was instinctive, she wasn't doing it consciously. When she calmed down, she would just let it go. This just remained at the back of my mind somewhere. When I was writing Ravan, I had that finger bone pendant, it just came back, right? And when he was troubled, he would just hold it. This is what makes characters
like
real.
The two fingers.
Yeah, the finger bone pendant.
You signed up for various self-help books. Did that help?
It was a big flop, man.
Is there a book that you can read which helps you improve how you write?
If self-help books worked, they would stop selling. I did try. I tried many of those self-help books. They make, they give you all these standard algos on how you can write. None of it worked for me. I'm not saying that, it hasn't worked for anyone. There are writers who write in that standard format and follow the algos and make Excel files and flowcharts. I don't do it that way. I kind of write instinctively. I just read the, the muse flow. Lord Shiva just sends the blessings, and I am just a channel.
Are you concerned, Amish, that you could run out of stories?
My concern is not that I would run out of stories. My biggest concern is I will die before I finish all my stories. The stories that I have already right now will keep me busy for the next 20-25 years. I do nothing else besides reading and writing. I do very little else. I don't do media interviews between books, only around book launch times. I don't do TV panel discussions. I don't do pastry parties. Even then, at the pace that I write, a year and a half per book, I'll be carrying too many of my stories into my cremation pyre. And that's my biggest fear. How do I get all my stories out?
You can outsource.
I'm trying. I'm considering that. I've started a writers center.
Won't that be a con job? When I read Amish Tripathi, I want to read Amish Tripathi. I don't want to read what some sidekick has written.
No. It's not going to be that way.
I want to read you. Why will I read
it's like
else
this.
writing
It's like
as
this.
part of your team?
I have two choices. I already have 20-25 series ideas in my mind. And I've left clues for many of them in the Shiva Trilogy and Ramchandra series. So I can either carry those stories into my cremation pyre, or the core ones only I will write. The others, what I do is essentially, I create the story summary. And I work with a writer, a published writer who I hire, who I pay an upfront amount to, who writes the first draft. So it's my story. I have the entire story summary. Those guys write the first draft. I will also tell them what is the research that they have to read, what is the other material, and then I work on that first draft. As far as a reader is concerned, it will read like my book. The language, everything, and it's my book. No, and it's my book. It's my story, and it fits into my universe. So if there's a spin-off, or for example, there's an assassin called Mara in the Ramchandra series. He was there just for some 4-5 scenes. Surprisingly, one of the most popular characters, right, for my readers. Very bizarre, very dark assassin. Now I have his entire backstory in my mind. Then I work on it. For you as a reader, it will read exactly like my book, with my language, my this thing. And then when it gets published, obviously it will have my name, but I don't want to misrepresent to a reader. So it will have the name of the commissioned writer as well. So he knows clearly this from the writer's center. But the way I see it, this is the only way I can get all my stories out. Otherwise I'll die without finishing all my stories.
So Amish, honestly, I have my own doubts, but I'd be fascinated to see what emerges from this whole process of getting others to write as part of the same process. But the good thing is you're trying these experiments and you're taking Indian publishing into new vistas. I wish you all the very best.
Thank
you
you.
so much
Thank
for
you.
joining me on Job Mind.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.